It's Tuesday, January 16th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is Scott Pianowski. Scott, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, it's a hell of a day to talk ball. It wasn't the greatest day to watch ball. We got a couple of duds on Monday, and really 5 of the 6 games in the wild card round were not great. The Rams-Lions played pretty entertaining Sunday night game. I don't think it was an instant classic or anything, but it was the best of the round, and we're going to preview what's coming ahead. There's some big spreads in next week. I almost wonder if this might be, we can get into this later with the preview, but maybe it's just going to be the playoffs where it's like everything's a precursor just to get the Ravens and the 49ers again. I think everybody feels like they've separated themselves. Obviously, they didn't play this week. The one-bye system, huge advantage. So I don't know. Maybe there's an upset here. There's a joker in the deck, but I still think the odds of getting that matchup are very good.
It did feel like we really weeded out some pretenders this weekend. Some of the teams, like we talked about in the last podcast, Dallas, we didn't expect them to be a pretender, but they clearly revealed themselves to be a very big pretender. The team that we're going to talk about here in a moment, the Philadelphia Eagles, they definitely, and that one was a little easier to see coming. Like I picked Tampa Bay to win. It is funny though. I feel like we got a lot of these pretenders out of the way this weekend, but I'm with you that it does feel like we are on a collision course to 49ers Ravens in the Super Bowl. People have been asking me like, what's your Super Bowl pick? Like the whole thing. I'm like, I know you want me to say something cool and cute, but I'm going to tell you that it's 49ers, Ravens for me. We'll see if some of the teams that won today have something to say about that. So let's waste no more time. We'll talk divisional round preview kind of at the end of this here, real quick thoughts as we head into it. But let's start with the game we just watched. Bucks 32, Eagles 9. Starting with Tampa Bay here, Scott. I mean, like I said, I picked the Eagles to lose this game. I was willing to bet against them no matter what, especially when it was Bucks +3, I think is when I bet it. Like I felt very confident in that, even if they weren't coming off some of their best showings at the end of the regular season. And I'm really not sure how good of a team they are just because they beat the very broken Eagles team. But man, Scott, this will go down in a season full of twists and turns. The Bucks just playing in the divisional round next week will go down as one of the biggest surprises to me.
For sure. Most of the season, I think people were thinking that whoever won the NFC South was just going to be fodder for probably the Cowboys, maybe the Eagles, that whoever didn't win the NFC East would go down there and just lay the slaughter. We know Dallas did that last year with the last the Tom Brady game was him getting beat down by Dallas pretty good. So I think a lot of people thought that, but the Eagles have been so hurt lately, and we'll again, they're the second part of this. The only disappointing thing from a fantasy perspective, and I disagree with you, Matt, there is fantasy to be played in the playoffs. I'm in contests and leagues and stuff like that, is we've enjoyed the great thing about Tampa Bay during the regular season is the narrow concentration, right? It's Baker, it's Mike Evans, it's Chris Godwin, it's Rachaad White, and they put up 32 points. If you didn't get to see this game, Baker threw for 337 and 3 touchdowns. Great. Let me dig in some Mike Evans. Well, he dropped a touchdown, dropped another pass. He has a 3 for 48 game. No Mike Evans. Oh, Chris Godwin, did he go crazy? Well, he got a late touchdown in garbage time, which bailed him out. But the touchdowns go to Trey Palmer, 56-yarder. David Moore caught a touchdown. Cade Otton had an 8 for 89 game with a couple of drops himself. He could have had a monster. He could have done the Gronkowski and Njoku Kelsey thing. But still, 8 for 89. He's somebody I feel like I put him in the sleeper page. Like every 4 or 5 weeks, I'd give out Cade Otton, and he usually would, 3 for 29 and maybe a touchdown. That's kind of what he did. So it was nice to see him spread his wings. But the main story for Tampa Bay, the defense, of course, was great. And part of it was Philadelphia can't do anything right now on offense. But Baker Mayfield on a prove-it contract wins the division. They get revenge. Remember, they played the Eagles early in the season. The Eagles pretty much did whatever they wanted that night. But other than taking 4 sacks, Baker was really good in this game. I get it. It's the Eagles defense, a lot of problems there. Imagine thinking Matt Patricia could fix anything, but you got to blame the players too. And of course, Philadelphia's very beat up, as pretty much everybody seems to be right now. But where are we at with Baker Mayfield? He comes into the league, first overall pick, some good moments with Cleveland. They get to the playoffs. There was that one season where Baker Mayfield was on every commercial, kind of like Mahomes and Kelsey are now. But with Mayfield, it felt like maybe let's get this while we can. I don't know how much longer I might be marketable. And then he got hurt. He got run out of Cleveland. He bounced around. Carolina didn't work out. He was on the Rams for like 15 seconds. where are we at with Baker Mayfield? I got to figure that Tampa Bay is going to find a way to keep him. There aren't that many plus quarterbacks in the league, even if he's going to be a league average or slightly better than league average quarterback. That's a win right now because a lot of teams would love to have that. What's your state of the Baker Mayfield address?
Man, and I admit that I was a big Baker hater coming into this year, so I'm definitely wearing like the cone of shame here when we're talking about Baker. And I do think if you look back, like you said, you lay out his whole history there very well. Like he's had some real stretches of solid play. Like I think he was always going to go down as a disappointing number 1 overall pick. Like Jared Goff was the number 1 overall pick. And like we talked about Jared Goff and, a long extend on the last podcast. Like Baker's been way more disappointing than Jared Goff, even when Jared Goff was shipped out of the LA Rams facility, kicked out on the way by Sean McVay. Baker never even reached those heights. So he's always going to go down as a disappointing number 1 overall pick type of player. However, really like the outlier downturn in his career was the Carolina Panthers. And like, you mentioned like who thought Matt Patricia was going to fix anything. Well, who thought anything good was going to come out of the Matt Rule Panthers, right?
Right.
I think I was too hard on Baker for that stretch there when he was legitimately like the worst quarterback in the league from an EPA per play standpoint, from a success rate standpoint. He was the stone worst quarterback in the NFL. Sam Darnold was better when he got in there. PJ Walker was better when he got in there. Now after Matt Rule was fired, but regardless. So I think I was too hard on Baker then, and for especially for the lack of connection with DJ Moore there, because it made me miss out on Mike Evans. It made me miss out on missed too much if you didn't take Chris Godwin, but you really missed out if you didn't take Mike Evans this year in fantasy football. And I regret the way that I felt about Baker. All that being said, I'm still a little skeptical of what he would be as a long-term starting answer. And I have no idea like what they do from a contract standpoint. Like, was this season good enough to give him the Geno Smith contract? Like, Andy Behrens obviously said he was going to be this year's Geno Smith, although we don't acknowledge that to Andy Behrens' face. He did say that on this podcast. Like, are you feeling like what were you feeling about Geno Smith a year ago, and how close is that to what you're feeling with Baker Mayfield right now?
Fascinating comp. My idea with Geno was that he won't be as good as he was last year, but the give back won't be significant. And somehow the give back was significant despite 3 receivers we like, despite a running game we like. And I realized Seattle lost their offensive line as soon as the season started.
I don't think that was all his fault. I don't think that a lot of the season was his fault. But yeah, he was obviously not as good.
For sure. The thing that impresses me about Baker here is, this year, if you look at all of his index stats of the key metrics that we look at least the front door, we're not talking like next gen stats here, but like his quarterback rating, his sack rating, his interception rate, touchdown rate, completion percentage, YPA, net YPA, all over league average. And he's never, even in his best seasons at Cleveland, he never did that. And he's 10% over the league average in rating. Rating is not the perfect stat, but it's a pretty good back of envelope stat. It's been a good season for negative play avoidance. Baker, even at Baker's best in Cleveland, you thought, well, maybe he plays with his hair on fire a little bit. Maybe he trusts his athleticism a little bit too much, more than he should. Never been a problem with competitiveness. That's one of the problems that the Browns fans had with Deshaun Watson. Is like, well, at least Baker was trying hard and was easy to like, even when he wasn't playing that well. I mean, how can you feel that great about Deshaun Watson? I think Tampa Bay finds a way to get done. And let's give a shout out to the offensive coordinator. Is it Dave Canales? Is that how you say it?
Dave Canales, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's done a really good job of rebuilding Baker's confidence and getting them to, winning the NFC South, whatever. You're not going to throw a parade or hang a banner for that. At least you shouldn't. I guess they probably will. But they beat the Eagles. Really, I know the Eagles have a lot of problems right now, but this game was not competitive, even though the score at halftime was only 16-9. Tampa Bay had dominated. Philly just had that one drive. And then the second half, Tampa Bay said, the score isn't really where it should be. Well, we'll fix that. And they put the hammer down. It comes down to this, Matt, for me. We're just trying to get as many, this in a year where quarterbacks got hurt, quarterbacks played poorly. We're just trying to get as many quarterbacks who can be watchable, who can support an offense, who can give us a puncher's chance every week. And I think Baker Mayfield's back in that conversation. And certainly Mike Evans, as you said, nobody was really down on Evans. It was just, well, do I trust Baker? A lot of people would have shied away from Evans. I didn't have anywhere near the Evans exposure that I normally do. And even though he didn't do much tonight, that goes down as a big loss for me.
Yeah, he's also a free agent at the end of this year, so that's another thing that they have to figure out. And again, their season's not over. They're going to be playing next week. Geno Smith, who had his quarterback coach with the 2022 Seattle Seahawks was Dave Canales, the Bucs offensive coordinator. So there's that connective tissue. $75 million contract over 3 years for Geno Smith. From an average per year perspective, he's the 18th highest paid quarterback. He's right there around Ryan Tannehill. He's right there around Jimmy Garoppolo, Jordan Love. Jordan Love's not going to be the 20th highest paid quarterback in the league much longer, I can tell you that. I feel actually looking at that in context with the rest of the league, like it's not the Daniel Jones deal. I wouldn't give Baker that, but I think something like the Geno Smith contract feels pretty good for Baker. And you run that back for another year while, and Jason Light's a really good GM. I would trust him to sort of kind of juggle two things there where you're juggling this like, hey, we're competitive with Baker Mayfield and hopefully you bring Mike Evans back and we're continuing to add to that group. But we're also trying to think of what's the next phase of the Buccaneers, even while Baker Mayfield. And again, just to give Baker one last bit of praise here before we move on to the Eagles. I know some people think this is hokey and this is BS, and I'm sure I've rolled my eyes at it before too. And when the Baker experience is bad, this stuff certainly doesn't matter, but I feel like you can't deny that he brought like an edge and a little oomph from an attitude perspective to this team that maybe lost a little bit of that last year with Tom Brady when he was kind of playing out the string of his career and certainly was not trying to get hit and wasn't really, not that he wasn't engaged or anything, but he just wasn't running the offense like it was standing back in there and taking a bunch of punishment. Like, look at the hits that Baker took tonight, even while coming in with all these broken ribs. Like, teammates do buy into that, and I think that buy-in really went a long way for Baker Mayfield this year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But that being said, let's move to the Philadelphia Eagles here. And man, like, if you thought that the Dallas Cowboys were embarrassed on Wild Card Weekend, the Philadelphia Eagles show up here on Monday night and say, "Hold my beer, baby, Scott." That was a rough watch. Like, I feel like I had secondhand embarrassment watching the Eagles on both sides of the ball tonight. Where do you want to begin with this mess?
Yeah, I mean, the final score is 32-9. It felt like 50-9. And one interesting thing to me, Jalen Hurts, I think his entire body is hurt right now. He just looks like somebody who's only playing because he's a gamer and they're in the playoffs and you just suck it up and play. But he only has one rushing attempt in this game. I realized they did also try for a 2-point conversion. And for one of the few times all year, the tush push was stopped. It was so evident early on. I was watching the game at a bar with some people, and there's a guy who had a Philadelphia ticket. And halfway through, they're only down 7, and he's like, I might as well throw this in the trash. There's no way I'm winning this. And then it got ugly in the second half. No A.J. Smith today. A.J. Brown today. They did have Devonta Smith, who actually had a heck of a game. But I know A.J. Brown. They don't want to run with Hurts. I thought his pocket awareness was really poor. He took a safety on a play where I think he had plenty of time to get the ball away. I realize he's trying to make a play, but don't try to make a play in the end zone. They give 2 points to Tampa. But Philadelphia was 10-1 at one point, and they finished the season with 6 losses in 7 games. At one point, Jalen Hurts was not just the favorite, but like a negative odds favorite to win the MVP. We're so far away from that. There's been some talk that maybe Nick Sirianni's in trouble. I don't see that, but they're going to ask him certainly to revamp his coaching staff. Again, you imagine thinking Matt Patricia could help the defense. He couldn't do that. But the Eagles Hurts this year fell back as a passer. His passing efficiency went down in most of the key stats, and eventually, I know he's a dynamic runner, but later in the season, as he got banged up, he didn't want to run as much. They still had that short yardage card to play, but for him to be a star, for him to be in that first tier of not just fantasy, but regular first tier quarterbacks, the guys who could be the year in, year out MVP candidates, he needs to be a better passer from the pocket. I'm not saying he's bad at it, but he's not in that elite tier. He's not in the Mahomes tier. He's not in the tier with at this point, if you gave me CJ Stroud or Jalen Hurts, and maybe this is just more of a Stroud comment going forward, I think I might take Stroud. Of course, he's younger. He hasn't gotten paid yet, so that's kind of moving the goalpost. But we'll see what Hurts can do when he's healthy next year. He certainly wasn't healthy, but I also wonder how much did the league catch up to the Eagles and maybe figure them out a little bit.
I mean, yeah, I'll take CJ Stroud ahead of Jalen Hurts right now. I don't know if, like I said, that's irresponsible. said I was going to say some irresponsible stuff on the last podcast about C.J. Stroud. Maybe that's irresponsible, but I feel really convicted that I would take, or I feel a lot of conviction that I would take C.J. Stroud ahead of Jalen Hurts right now. And, you bring up Nick Sirianni and whether he can survive this. Man, I don't know, because just to end that way and to be the defensive stuff aside, and like that's putting a pretty big thing aside because that side of the ball was a stone cold disaster. And yeah, I'm obviously echo everything you say about Matt Patricia and everything that happened there. And like, I know they're sort of banged up, but this is also the group they built. Like, they brought back James Bradbury. They paid him money. Like, they brought back Darius Slay. They paid him a bunch of money. And like, James Bradbury can't cover anybody. The reason that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I know Mike Evans had some drops, but the reason those guys didn't go off and like the other guys had the big stat games, even if they weren't getting funneled targets, because they couldn't tackle anybody. It's like, David Moore, like, yeah, he gets a couple catches. Cool, that's neat. Well, he's going to take him to the house. 2 catches, 66 yards for David Moore. I mean, Trey Palmer houses his 1 catch for 56 yards. It's tough for Mike Evans to get 8 catches in a game. I could have used that, by the way, for one of my parlays. Could have used, Mike Evans to have 100 yards or something. The reason he's not going to get that is because these other guys are housing plays because the defense is such a disaster. But even just putting that aside, like, you lose Shane Steichen in the offseason, you promote Brian Johnson, and the offense isn't fundamentally different, but it is so much worse. And like, this has been an issue all season long with the Philadelphia Eagles, Scott, that they have no answer for when teams blitz them. Talked about it on the preview podcast with Dalton last week, like how bad Jalen Hurts has been when you have sent extra rushers. And with that being a clear issue all year long, all season long, it's been a problem. You go into the wild card round against a team that blitzes almost as much. They're top 3 in blitz rate, definitely every single year. Tampa Bay with Todd Bowles. They're one of the most blitz heavy, aggressive teams, one of the best blitzing teams, period, in the NFL. You go against that team and you have no answers. Like, you still have no hot plays in the third quarter of this game when you're losing. And like, you're an offensive coach, Nick Sirianni. This is your side of the ball. Like, I don't know if he's going to get fired. There has definitely been some reporters that have intimated like he's actually the secret candidate or this is the secret Bill Belichick candidate spot. I don't know if I buy that, but maybe by the time you're listening to this, he's already been fired and they're courting Bill Belichick. I don't know, but there's got to be some fallout from like they have good players, but these players are not set up to succeed. And players are getting actively worse. And that is, I feel like, a sign of bad coaching.
Totally fair. Also, this could have been the last game of Jason Kelce, probably a Hall of Fame career. So. He even talked about maybe walking away after last season. I think if they had won the Super Bowl, he probably would have retired. But he comes back, hat tip to him for what looks like the period on a great career. The thing with Sirianni, though, if he were to get fired, he would be isolated as one of the, not being fired for anything off the field or anything, you never know what tension could be with a team's infrastructure. But
I feel like there's a lot of tension with that Eagles team.
Okay, but 34-17 and no losing seasons. They win 14 games last year. They go to the Super Bowl. They're, 1 flag away from beating the Chiefs in what was a really great Super Bowl. I know the way they ended this year was a mess, but the thing is their offense got a little bit worse. The defense just fell apart. You could argue they had the worst defense in the league at the end of the year. I'm not talking about the playoff teams. I'm talking about everybody. And remember, they finished at the end of the year. They were +5 in point differential. By Pythagorean, they should have been a 500 team. And there was kind of like, this is like the overdue tax to pay. It all came due, right? They were 10-1, and then when they should have been like 7-4 or something like that. And it was like, we saw that with Minnesota last year. They won all the close games, and this year they didn't win the close games. That stuff comes around, and I think it's just with the injuries and with some of the regression, it was a give back. They're going to say to Sirianni, we have to fix the defense, and maybe they make him let go of an offensive position coach or something. But I'd be surprised unless there's something under the rug that we don't know about if they didn't bring him back.
Yeah, I think there might be something under the rug that we don't know about, but either way, like I feel pretty strongly that either you have to come away from this season saying this was, and you don't have to fire him for this, but that it was an all-out failure from again, put the defense aside, just on the offensive side of the ball, like it was an all-out failure to adjust in critical situations from an offensive head coach and the staff that he had, cultivated. Once you lose Shane Steichen, who's been awesome in Indianapolis, like either that is your answer, or you need to have an uncomfortable conversation about the limitations that Jalen Hurts is your starting quarterback, who you just paid a boatload of money. You gotta have an uncomfortable conversation about what Jalen Hurts and who he is as a quarterback puts on the limitations that puts on your offense. Like, I don't know that there's a third option there. Like, I think it's one of those two things.
I know we're already, overpaced on trying to keep this a tidy podcast, but I'm a little bit spooked to draft Jalen Hurts next year. I reserve the right to change my mind. Maybe by the time we start mock drafting and best ball drafting, I'll have a different approach. We'll see what they do in free agency and the draft. But this end of the season, I know a lot of it was injury. I just think eventually they're going to pull back. His rushing equity can't be what it's been the last few years in perpetuity. Eventually, you have to say, we don't want this guy taking hits. And I know it's a successful play and all that, but right now he's a reactive pick for me, not a proactive pick for 24.
Let's talk about the other game here from Monday. Bills 31, Steelers 17. Another non-surprising result. The Bills had some funky moments. The Steelers had some peppy moments, but ultimately, Scott, I expected the Bills to pull out of this one, and they did pull out of it, primarily on some Josh Allen. How can you not love that guy? And Khalil Shakir icing it with a pretty awesome touchdown that was like vintage Boise State Khalil Shakir. What's your confidence level with the Bills right now as they move forward here?
It's funny. So they make the coordinator change. And the offense has been a little bit worse by all the key efficiency metrics since they did that. And today was kind of one of those games. I mean, Josh Allen, the big thing is he didn't turn the ball over, but 6.8 yards per attempt, okay. Diggs was 7 for 52 on 9 targets. We have not seen anything close to vintage Stephon Diggs, and he's getting into an age pocket that we're nervous about. They got the right draw. Nobody thought Pittsburgh was going to win this game, and it just felt like Buffalo gets out to the early lead. They get out, 21-0 lead, and I think everybody thought that was over. Pittsburgh made it cosmetically close a couple of times, but they're not built to make a big comeback. I don't know, man. A month ago, we talked on the pod and the reactions pod on Sunday night, and I thought maybe Buffalo was a sleeping giant, just getting to the playoffs, and they could still steal the division, which they did. Maybe more about Miami's flaws than Buffalo being great. I don't trust the Buffalo defense. I wish I felt better about the Buffalo receiving room right now. James Cook is a good player, but I wouldn't say he's like an electric player. The best thing Buffalo has right now is Josh Allen, the playmaker. He has that long touchdown run today. And then it kind of reflects, I kind of had it with this quarterback. I'm going to fake like I'm sliding. Everybody pulls up. You make a touchdown run out of it. Then later in the game, he does go to slide, and he puts the defender in conflict, and then the flag gets thrown. I think this is probably an unpopular stance. I would not mind if they just said, the heck with it. Once you pass the line of scrimmage and you run, you're whatever happens, you're a football player. I've kind of had it with this idea that you could do the fake slide, or you could do a little shiftiness, and it puts the defender in a point where he has a hitting zone that's the size of a postage stamp. Anyway, right now the Buffalo offense is Josh Allen makes stuff up. I don't feel like they have a schedule the way I would like to see.
I mean, that has kind of always been the Buffalo offense.
For sure.
There's just been some.
Yeah, but Diggs is the steady backdrop, the drumbeat, right? And they don't have that right now.
They don't, but they do have some better ancillary players than
sure.
we're used to them. I mean, Khalil Shakir is a legit dude.
Kincaid's a baller too, for sure.
Kincaid's a baller. James Cook is really good in the run game, and yeah, that's definitely like Josh Allen let your hair down in the playoffs for sure. In terms of the rushing stuff, obviously the 52-yard touchdown, which I get it. The fake slide was problematic, but like, hey, Minkah Fitzpatrick, like, let's play to the whistle here. Like, he definitely could have been in a position to at least like slow Josh Allen up. Mm-hmm. That was a tough look, I think, for the Steelers defense on that play in particular. Again, we'll see what the Bills. I'm with you that I might have a little bit more trust in the Bills than you do, but trying to trust the Bills is definitely trying to like cup water in your hands. It's just, if there's always something leaking and you're trying to close it here and you're not 100% sure. So I'm not fully on board with the Bills, but I feel pretty good about them moving forward. And again, we'll see. I think they could definitely beat this Chiefs team next week in Buffalo. That's for sure. Do you have anything to say like revelatory about the Steelers, man? Like this is kind of what I expected to get out of them. You know, Mike Tomlin leaving the press conference after the game when a reporter asked him or started to ask a question, say, "Hey, Mike, you're entering the last year of your deal," and he walks off the podium as there's been some speculation about is he going to remain the coach with the Steelers? Is he going to take a year off? Is he going to maybe ask for a trade? I don't know. I do kind of roll my eyes at some of the anti-Tomlin stuff, but I also kind of roll my eyes at some of the like diehard pro-Tomlin stuff. Like I had people, when I pointed out, because I think Tom Gower, who used to write for Football Outsiders, pointed out on Twitter that Mike Mularkey, you guys remember Mike Mularkey? He's won a playoff game more recently than Mike Tomlin, and I shared the dates of that. January, I believe it was January 2016 is the last time, 2017 is the last time that Mike Tomlin's won a playoff game. It's January 2018 for Mike Mularkey, who has been employed with the Tennessee Titans for like 100 years. Okay. He's actually fired that next game after winning that playoff contest. So let's say like a bunch of pro Tomlin people I mentioned like, oh, well, the roster is bad. They don't have a quarterback. I mean, if you don't think Mike Tomlin's not picking these players like are a big part of it, I don't know what to tell you here, man. So I don't really know where to go with the Steelers from here. I feel like we're a little bit doomed to get headlines of a Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett quarterback competition in a few months, which I'm really not looking forward to. Do you have any positive things to say about the Steelers than I do?
Well, I'm just laughing because you mentioned Mike Mularkey, who I haven't thought about in a million years. And you mentioned Tom Gower, Football Outsiders. I really missed the piece they used to do called Audibles at the Line, where they would talk about the games. I guess it kind of get replaced by Twitter and everything, but they would talk about the games in progress. And Gower was always the guy who was watching the Titans game. He didn't always get a lot of people who wanted to talk about the Titans games with him. But if you needed a check-in on the Titans, if you didn't have them on one of your primary screens, Tom Gower was your guy. So
shout out to Tom.
Shout out to Tom and Football Outsiders, which was a really fun site, which has since gone the way of the dodo. But, Aaron Schatz is still around doing his thing. And there's a lot of smart people. Doug Farrar worked for Yahoo for a while. He's a Football Outsiders guy. So a lot of love to them. They've made us smarter. Pickett was so bad this year that they got to give Mason Rudolph. They got to open this thing up and say, we're going to play the best man. And whoever that is starting, whether it's Pickett, whether it's Rudolph, whether they bring in somebody, I don't know. Maybe they throw money. Maybe they get in the Kirk Cousins business. I don't know. But we don't want to see Deontay Johnson go down like this. We don't want to see George Pickens, who thinks he should have been the Pro Bowl. No, you shouldn't have been the Pro Bowl, George Pickens. But we would like to see him with better quarterback play.
He said he should have been in the Pro Bowl?
He did. Well, yeah, he was all uppity about it, and he was saying some salty language about the Pro Bowl, about how stupid it is, because George Pickens didn't make it. So, yeah, right. You're probably not the best receiver on your own team. So, play a little bit better, Pickens. And by the way, play a little bit harder too. I wouldn't mind seeing that. But when the playoff schedule, when the brackets were released, we all knew Pittsburgh. It was just an accomplishment for them to make it to the playoffs. They had no Super Bowl equity. I'm sure their Super Bowl odds were ridiculous. And, if they somehow miraculously beat Buffalo, they would have gotten smashed next week against Baltimore. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And good for Mike Tomlin. If he becomes a free agent, he'll be signed in a second if he wants a job. And again, he'd be an interesting candidate for a lot of these teams. It's like, well, we're good, but do we have the right guy? A lot of those Tony Dungy, John Gruden type of handoffs where you're walking into a team that's already winning. You're walking into a house that's already furnished. Mike Tomlin wouldn't have to go to Carolina or one of those bad jobs. But I don't know, man. I think next year the Steelers are finally going to have that 6-11 season that's been percolating for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll have to see what happens with Mike Tomlin. He is entering the last year of his contract, even if he didn't want to talk to Brooke Pryor about it in the press conference afterwards. Like, by the way, fair question. Okay,
for sure, absolutely.
How can you ask that question in this moment? Number one, she didn't even ask the question. She didn't even get to ask the question. He walked off beforehand. It's a fair question. It's fair to talk to the head coach about his future when this stuff has been out there. If he wants to come out and categorically deny it, that's his chance to do it. Anyways.
And also, to be fair with Tomlin, he's actually one of the more forthcoming coaches. Like he actually tells the truth about injuries, as far as I can tell. Where most coaches, I used to joke that Belichick wouldn't even concede that there was a game on Sunday at 1:00. Tomlin's generally a pretty good guy with the media, but maybe that's just the wrong time for him to answer a question like that, and maybe that him being if he was definitely coming back, it would be easy to say, oh, I'm here. I'm a long-term guy here. We have something going here. Right. I'm not going anywhere. As long as they want me, I'm here. He could have easily said that, and he didn't. So maybe by avoiding the question, maybe that gives some credibility to there's a story here.
Yeah, and again, if he's back, I do just hope that we're not looking at, hey, bring back Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett and let them duke it out. Let, two dogs, one bone in training camp. Please, God, don't give us that. Because otherwise, I think we're headed to that 6-11 season that you are talking about here. So that's the Steelers. That's the Bills. Divisional round is set. Here's how the games are going to unfold. Saturday, 4:30, we get Texans versus Ravens. Can't wait to see that. Saturday at 8 o'clock, we get Packers versus 49ers. Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern, Bucks versus Lions, and Sunday, 6:30 Eastern, Chiefs versus Bills. Scott, any real quick thoughts about the slate, how things have ended up? It's probably too early to hold you to a prediction, buddy, but anything kind of stand out to you about this group of teams we got next week? To me, it looks pretty sick.
Oh, I'm excited. It's just going to be nice. Welcome back, San Francisco. Welcome back, Baltimore. Is there an edict from the NFL that whenever Houston has a playoff game, it has to be a Saturday afternoon game? Because, man, are they parked in that game, that spot? They played in it this week. They're going to play in it next week. And I can't wait to see Lamar Jackson, who doesn't have the greatest playoff resume. Baltimore has lost as the heavy favorite, as the point differential champion and all that. They've had some disappointments before. Mike Vrabel stole their lunch money at least once. So this is the year. The setup is here. Houston's good, but they're a year early. Baltimore, as you would expect, is 9-point favorites in this game. The Ravens are set up to go. I don't think it's the best version of the Chiefs or the Bills. So this should be the year Baltimore goes to the Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. And as much as I love where Houston is going, they got the coach right. I'm ready to fall CJ Stroud into a burning building right now. You would think the Ravens take care of business. Are the Packers satisfied? It's another case of, just getting to the playoffs and finding out Jordan Love is really good. That's all a win. And they have the coach right, too, with Matt LaFleur. The 49ers have everything, and they just got to rest. The only thing you worry about with the teams off the bye, sometimes they come out a little bit flat, but I think this game could get out of hand, too. And, of course, the spread is expecting that. It's a 10-point spread in that game. So those are the two big spreads. The lower spreads are on Sunday. The Lions, I think, opened up as a 6-point favorite over Tampa Bay, and then a straight 3 with Buffalo and Kansas City. Let me ask you this. Who do you think, if you were the Ravens, who do they least want to play among, if they were to advance this week, who would they least want to play, the Chiefs or the Bills?
That's a great question. I feel like you'd want to play the Chiefs right now, which I know sounds crazy, but
I think you're right.
I think that Baltimore can put up points, right? And I'm trying to think of, like, off the top of my head, like which defense would Baltimore match up better with. But at the same time, like, it's Lamar Jackson. These guys, like, they can beat up on any defense. It's fine. I feel like Buffalo can make a game weird enough, and Josh Allen, like, oh great, Mike McDonald, you called all those perfect coverage schemes, and you disguise the looks, and you post snap, change picture, great, all that stuff. Well, cool. Josh Allen's just gonna run for 50 yards because he's a wild stallion. Like, he can break your back that way. I think I'd rather play Kansas City right now.
I think Buffalo has more paths to beat you, and certainly more playmakers on offense. I'll tell you something that puts a warm feeling in my heart. So I'm looking at the games and the lines and everything, and it has that little bug where it shows the tickets are available for all these games. Texans, Ravens, tickets as low as $183. Packers, 49ers, tickets as low as $281. I'm sure Dalton Del Don already has his tickets for that.
100%, yeah.
Chiefs and Bills, tickets as low as $182. So all these tickets, $183, $281. Buccaneers, Lions, tickets as low as $660. Your playoff fever has hit Detroit, back-to-back home games. If they can take care of business and they're better than the Buccaneers. Doesn't mean they'll win. Tampa Bay's got good players. Maybe Mike Evans has a monster game against a very gettable Detroit secondary. And Tampa Bay's got some playmakers on defense too. Winfield had a hell of a year, but the Lions, they hold serve. They're going to the NFC Championship game, baby. The first time since the early 90s. I'm here for it. And again, the tickets as low as $660, which is a pretty fair chunk of change. Detroit could not be more crazy over their Lions, and I'm here for it.
I'm absolutely here for it. And that bit of good vibes is a great way to put a bow on Wild Card weekend. It was pretty fun. A lot of blowouts, a lot of lopsided scores, but I think we learned a lot about some of these teams with some big, grand, league-wide takeaways. And, man, I will definitely come out of this week just thinking, hey, if you don't have a guy that can be like a CJ Stroud or even a Jordan Love, and you know that's beyond the established guys, like you really got to be thinking about what your future looks like in this league. Well, our future for this podcast, we're going to be back on Thursday. Dalton Del Don is going to join me just like we did last week. All the stats, all the data, all the mismatches you need to know for divisional round. Make sure you join us for that podcast on Thursday. Until then, we're out.